something you brought up before that we won't have time to cover today, but it's fascinating is entrepreneurs are a really unique group of humans. And in fact, entrepreneurs have more in common with each other than most ethnicities, races. I mean, if you look at the traits that cut across all entrepreneurs,
right.
It's a really interesting study that and there's a guy that I'm working with. I'm volunteering to help with a company called Calacanis, and it's I'm an advisor, but again, I have no financial affiliation. And this guy, Michael Freeman, has done probably the most research on entrepreneurship and mental health. And he has written extensively about the character traits, the mental health issues that are really in every entrepreneur, and that you may sidestep it through your process, but eventually most entrepreneurs are triggered, and these conditions that are in them are brought out. And instead of hiding from it, we should just embrace it. And in some cases, like you look at someone like Howard Hughes, right? He had many mental health issues, yet he was wildly successful. And so understanding how to...
That was my question too before the break when I had said, do founders, do people with, mental conditions, mental uniqueness get drawn to entrepreneurship, or does entrepreneurship actually drive people to mental conditions or illness? What are your thoughts there? And what are the traits, either direction, in terms of cause and correlation?
So about half, this is kind of science, not my conjecture, about half of the conditions that entrepreneurs experience as entrepreneurs are genetic. Like half of the influence on their mental health is genetic. So I would say that really there's a certain kind of person that's drawn to entrepreneurship. Somebody
with something to prove, somebody who has leadership or narcissism or Asperger's, we see so many ADHD, archetypes, ADHD for sure, because you get to bounce around as the CEO, from the sales department to the product department to the customer support department to investors to press. I mean, it is definitely ADHD, ADD seems like a superpower. But then we
Dyslexia. I mean, look at our governor's dyslexic. You're dyslexic. There's a way you've had to compensate for your dyslexia that is probably in there as part of what has made you a successful
It's definitely
entrepreneur.
in the mix.
Yeah.
Well, you know what I think also it's humbling for me to mispronounce words sometimes and then have to study harder. And then people read my book and they go, that's one of the best business books I ever read. And I'm like, how did I get there? And I realized what it was I figured out a writing style that worked for me, which was I wasn't trying to emulate anybody else's writing style. I just had heard that somebody said, write down what you say. And so then I started recording conversations that I would have, in fact, the podcast, and then I would transcribe it, and then I would use that as the framework for when I would write something. And then people say, I hear your voice in your blog posts. And it's like, the reason you hear my voice in my blog posts is because I transcribed my voice and then polished that.
That's really smart.
It was just like,
really smart.
It was just like you, and this is one of the things where the superpower, you can turn any of these things into a superpower. Asperger's, people can't make eye contact, who can focus, and they're at dinner and you're like, hello, where are you? And, they're just off in space solving some math problem while everybody else is talking. And you're like, yeah, that's my friend blank, and the other friend blank, and this other friend. And how many people do we know? I mean, do we know who are on the spectrum? And even I think, inappropriately, they make fun of Zuckerberg for being on the spectrum on Saturday Night Live. It's a little bit cruel, I think.
Yeah, it
is. Whether it's accurate or not, and it likely is, but it's a little bit cruel.
He was born that way, whatever, whatever here's one stat that's kind of fascinating. And this is what you're doing and what this show is doing. What we're all trying to do is shine a light on these conditions, because it allows us to meet these talented entrepreneurs where they are versus trying to force them to be something they're not. And so, this statistic, I'm looking at it now, I found it today, 38% of entrepreneurs have reported a diagnosable mental health condition that includes depression, ADHD, bipolar, anxiety, and addiction, right? So 38% of entrepreneurs.
The addiction part we see all the time. Like, you watch all these VCs going up and down Santora Road on those road bikes, and they become mental,
right?
Taking their bikes and riding to Stinson Beach and back and Tahoe, and then they become triathletes. It's almost comical that the addiction can apply to, kite surfing. Like, how many of our friends do we see become addicted to kite surfing and they can't stop?
Right.
And you're like, you are the co-founder of Google. You're going to need to get off the kite board at some point and get back to the office, and like it's the addiction. I mean, thankfully it's not drugs or alcohol, which are, negative addictions. But if you get addicted to kiteboarding or whatever, you want to ski 30 days a year, like, not a problem. Like a healthy channeling, like you're saying,